This might feel a little different to how you usually listen. Not because the ideas are complicated, but because you might start to notice something as you're thinking it. The human is usually explained from the ground up. We begin with biology, cells, neurons, signals, systems. If you go deeper, you find chemistry. Molecules forming structure, energy moving between bonds. And beneath that, physics. Fields, forces, interactions. It's a clean structure, each layer building on the one below it. Each layer adding more detail, more precision. And it feels complete. Because if you understand the structure well enough, everything else should follow. How the body works, how the brain processes, how behavior emerges. But there's something quiet inside that idea that doesn't fully settle. Because before any structure can be understood, it has to appear. Before we can study the brain already has to be there. Not just as matter, but as something we can experience. And you can feel that shift already, even if it's subtle. Because now the question changes just slightly. Not what things are made of, not how systems interact, but something more basic than that. How does anything become experienceable at all? Physics can describe what is possible. Chemistry can describe what holds together. Biology can describe what sustains itself. They define conditions, but they don't explain why one version of reality becomes the one that you live. And if you follow that carefully, you start to notice something. Biology doesn't start at the beginning. It begins after something has already happened. When you look at it this way, the usual explanation starts to shift just slightly. Mechanism explains how things interact. Signals move, systems respond, patterns form, and it does that well. Neurons fire in sequences, electrical activity propagates, networks synchronize. You can measure it, map it, model it. But all of it is happening inside something that already feels like a world. A world that is already present, already structured, already meaningful, enough to be observed. And there's a quiet loop here. We try to explain experience as something that comes out of the system, while using experience to observe the system in the first place. So the model moves forward, but only because something is already there to make that movement visible. You've probably felt this before. That sense that everything we describe is already being described from somewhere, from within something that is already present. And again, this doesn't make the model wrong, it makes it partial, because it's describing how systems behave once they are already available to experience. Not how they become available in the first place. It explains transmission, how signals move, how information flows, how structure maintains itself. But it doesn't explain appearance, how anything becomes something that can be experienced at all. So the question deepens just a little further. Not how the system works, but what allows the system to show up as something that can be known. If you step back for a moment, the human can be seen as layers. At its deepest level, physics, fields, forces, interactions, defining what is possible. From that, chemistry. Atoms forming bonds, molecules holding structure, defining what can persist. From that, biology. Cells organizing matter, metabolism sustaining energy, systems regulating themselves over time. Then physiology, signals coordinating the body, energy moving where it's needed, a system holding itself together. And from there, the brain. Modeling, prediction, memory, and finally, experience. Meaning, identity, a world lived from the inside. It's precise, each layer constrained by the one below it, each layer adding structure, stability, definition. And it explains a lot, because if you understand these layers, you can explain how matter behaves, how systems sustain themselves, how organisms adapt, respond, survive. But if you stay with that, something still doesn't fully settle, because each layer explains how things are constrained, not how anything becomes experienced. Physics defines possibility, chemistry defines structure, biology defines organization, but none of them explain why one version of reality becomes the one you live. They describe conditions, but not the selection. They tell you what can happen, but not what actually does. And that's where something deeper begins. If the layers don't fully explain it, then something else has to be happening. Not after structure, before it. Instead of asking how structure creates experience, there's a quieter question. What needs to happen for structure to be experienced at all? Because before anything can be known, something has to become clear enough to be known. Out of everything that could be, something becomes what is. Not everything at once, just one version. In more precise terms, a system moves from many possible states into one stable configuration, a reduction, a resolution, from possibility into something that holds. And this is not something that happens occasionally. It's continuous. Before thought, before interpretation, before meaning. Something is always settling, so that something can be experienced. And once you see that, even slightly, the question changes again. Not just what exists, but what determines which version becomes real. You can start to feel it more cleanly here. Not everything is fixed before you experience it. There are many possible states, many ways a moment could resolve, but what you experience feels like only one, because something has already settled. Not everything, just one version. What you're experiencing right now is already a selection. In more exact terms, it's a reduction of possible states into a single stable configuration. And you can feel it, because this moment feels resolved. It feels like this is what's happening, even though it could have been otherwise. So what feels like reality is the result of something stabilizing. Not everything that could exist, only what holds. What persists is what the system can maintain with enough stability and low enough noise. That's why it feels solid, not because it always was, but because it's stable enough to remain. And this is happening continuously, every moment, before you think, before you interpret, before you name anything. Something is settling so that something can appear. But not everything settles the same way. Some systems are clear, others are noisy. Some hold together easily, almost without effort. Others struggle to keep anything stable. And that difference shapes what becomes real, because the way a system resolves depends on its internal stability, its coherence. Coherence isn't belief, it isn't mood, it isn't preference, it's structural stability. The ability of a system to hold information together without contradiction, without fragmentation, without interference. A coherent system resolves cleanly. A fragmented system resolves with distortion. You felt this. Moments where everything is clear, aligned, so easy to hold. And moments where everything feels scattered, uncertain, unstable. That difference is not just emotional, it's a difference in signal stability. Two people can stand in the same place and not experience the same world. Not because the place changed, but because the system resolving it did. And if that's true, then what you experience is not just the world. It's the world as your system was able to hold it. And the clearer the system, the more precisely reality resolves. From here, the human starts to look different. Not just a biological system moving through a fixed reality, but something that participates in how reality becomes stable. The brain doesn't just generate reality, it stabilizes patterns that didn't collapse. Neural activity doesn't create experience from nothing. It organizes, filters, and maintains. what the system was able to resolve. Biology is still there. The nervous system processes signals. The body regulates itself. The brain models the world. All of that remains true. But now it sits differently. Not as the origin of experience, but as the interface through which experience becomes stable enough to persist. And from here, everything you usually think of as you starts to take on a new role. Identity is what keeps the pattern consistent. Emotion changes how the system weighs what matters. Attention selects what becomes clear and what fades into the background. These aren't just psychological traits, they are variables inside how reality resolves for you. What you call yourself is the pattern that has remained stable enough to keep reality forming the same way. And that pattern is always adjusting, always shaping how the next moment settles. And this doesn't stop with a single system, because no observer is isolated. Every system exists inside other systems, exchanging signals, sharing meaning, influencing stability. When many observers interact, their patterns begin to overlap. Shared language, shared expectations, shared interpretations. And from that, a shared reality begins to form. Not because the world is identical for everyone, but because enough systems are resolving it in a compatible way. But when those systems fragment, when attention is pulled in too many directions, when signals become overloaded, when identity becomes unstable, the resolution begins to fragment too. Not just emotionally, structurally. The signal becomes less stable, the noise increases, and what gets experienced becomes less coherent. You can feel it already, not just in individuals, but across everything. Moments where things feel aligned, clear, easy to understand. And the moments where everything feels scattered, confused, or disconnected. That isn't just social. It's a shift in how systems are resolving reality. A fragmented system cannot hold a stable world. So the picture changes, not completely, just at the starting point. The usual way of seeing it says reality exists and you observe it. But now it starts to look different. Possibilities exist and something settles. And you experience the result. Not everything that could be, only what was able to stabilize. And how it stabilizes depends on the system experiencing it. Its structure, its coherence, its ability to hold information without breaking apart. So what you call experience is not everything that exists. It's what your system was able to hold without collapsing. And once you see that, even slightly, something shifts. Not outside you, but in how you understand what's happening. At the beginning, this might have felt like a small change, just a different way of looking at things. But now, it doesn't feel small anymore. What you call reality is the most stable version your system could hold. And if that system changes, what becomes real changes with it.